Hey everyone, Sarah here. Rewind Justice brings you revenge stories that will blow your mind. If you're ready, hit subscribe and let's go.
My name is Elena Vasquez, and for 8 years, my family has believed I'm an administrative assistant at a government office in Washington, D.C. They're not entirely wrong. I do work for the government. I do have an office in D.C. What they don't know is that I'm a senior intelligence analyst for the Department of Homeland Security with Level 4 security clearance, specializing in counterterrorism financial tracking. My actual title is classified. My work involves tracing funding networks for international threat organizations. The cases I work on are briefed to the National Security Council. I can't tell my family any of this, so I let them believe I'm a secretary. My older brother, David, is a corporate attorney in Chicago. He makes $340,000 a year at a prestigious firm. He drives a BMW. He wears $1,000 suits. He's everything my immigrant parents dreamed their children would become. I make $165,000 a year, drive a 6-year-old Toyota, and wear clothes from Nordstrom Rack. At family gatherings, David talks about his cases, his clients, his partnership track. I smile and say I had a busy week at the office. For 8 years this arrangement worked. Until Thanksgiving 2025, when David decided my vague answers about work meant I was lying about everything. He hired a private investigator to prove I was a fraud. What David didn't understand is that when you hire someone to investigate a person with Level 4 security clearance, you don't get a report. You get a visit from people who don't identify which agency they're from. The backstory. Our parents, Carlos and Maria Vasquez, came to the United States from Mexico in 1985. Dad worked construction. Mom cleaned houses. They saved every dollar to put us through college. David was the golden child. Charismatic. Confident. Full scholarship to Northwestern. Law degree from Georgetown. He was on partner track by 32. He bought our parents a house in Phoenix. He was proof their sacrifice meant something. I was different. Quieter. Better with patterns than people. I got into Georgetown on academic merit. Double majored in international relations and computer science. I was recruited by the Department of Homeland Security during my senior year. The recruiter had been direct. Your analytical skills are exceptional. We need people who can find patterns in financial data that others miss. The work is classified. You won't be able to discuss it with anyone outside the agency. Your family will never know what you really do. I'd accepted immediately. After graduation in 2017, I went through 6 months of intensive training. Background investigation. Polygraph tests. Security clearance process. By January 2018, I had Level 4 clearance and a desk in a building my family couldn't visit. At family dinners when they asked about my job I said, I work for the Department of Homeland Security in an administrative role. Not a lie. Just incomplete. Dad assumed I was a secretary. Mom worried I didn't make enough money. David occasionally made jokes about government bureaucrats. I never corrected them. By 2025 I'd been promoted 3 times. I'd worked on cases that disrupted terror financing networks in 4 countries. I'd briefed members of Congress. I'd received commendations I couldn't show anyone. My work was meaningful and important. But at Thanksgiving dinner I was still just Elena who works at a government office. The dismissal pattern. David's condescension had been building for years, but it crystallized at family gatherings. Easter 2022. Elena, have you thought about getting a real career? Government admin work doesn't really go anywhere. Christmas 2023. I mean it's stable work but you're 30 now. Shouldn't you be thinking bigger? Thanksgiving 2024. My secretary makes $85,000. You should talk to her about career advancement strategies. Every comment. Every suggestion. Every piece of advice assumed I was unsuccessful. I never defended myself. My security clearance prohibited discussing my actual work. And part of me was curious. How long would David build his superiority on assumptions he'd never verified? The breaking point came at Thanksgiving 2025. We were at my parents' house in Phoenix. 20 family members. David was holding court about a major case he'd won. A settlement worth $12 million for his client. My aunt asked, Elena, how's your work going? Before I could answer, David interrupted. Elena's work is fine. Very stable. Government administrative positions have excellent benefits. He smiled that condescending smile. Not exciting but reliable. Dad nodded. Steady work is good work. I smiled. It keeps me busy. David leaned forward. Although I've been meaning to ask, what exactly do you do? You're always vague about it. I work in financial analysis, I said. True if incomplete. For which department? Homeland Security. Doing what specifically? I can't discuss specifics. Security protocols. David laughed. Security protocols for administrative work? Elena, come on. The table went quiet. I'm serious, I said calmly. My work is classified. David's expression shifted to something harder. Or maybe you're embarrassed because you're just a secretary and you don't want to admit it. Mom looked uncomfortable. Dad frowned. I've noticed this for years, David continued. You're always vague. You never share details. You deflect questions. Either you're doing something you're ashamed of or you're lying about your position. My cousin shifted awkwardly. My aunt stared at her plate. I took a sip of water. I'm not lying, David. Then prove it. Tell us exactly what you do. I can't. Because it's classified admin work? He smirked. That's not a thing, Elena. It is for my position. David set down his fork. I don't believe you. I think you've been exaggerating your role for years and you're using classified as an excuse. The room was completely silent. Think whatever you want, I said quietly. David pulled out his phone. Actually, I'm going to prove it. I'm hiring a private investigator. Someone who can verify your employment, your position, your actual role. At Christmas dinner, we'll have the truth. Mom said, David, that seems excessive. She's my sister, David said. If she's been lying to the family for 8 years, we deserve to know. I looked at him. Go ahead. Hire whoever you want. David smiled. I already have someone in mind. James Mitchell, former FBI. Top investigator in D.C. He'll find the truth. I nodded. I'm sure he will. What David didn't know, what he couldn't know, is that when former FBI agents investigate people with level 4 clearance, there are protocols. Automatic flags. Immediate notifications. James Mitchell would submit his background check request to verify my employment. That request would hit a classified firewall. It would trigger an automatic security review. And people with significantly more authority than David would want to know why someone was investigating me. I didn't need to do anything except wait. The preparation. I left Thanksgiving and drove back to my apartment in Arlington, Virginia. Not the modest one-bedroom my family imagined. The 1,800 square foot condo I'd bought in 2021 that I poured wine and opened my secure laptop. The one connected to DHS systems through encrypted channels. I had protocols to follow. When someone outside the agency attempts to investigate personnel with security clearance, we're required to report it. I'd need to file a notification with my supervisor and the security division. But first I checked something. I pulled up my security file. Every 6 months my clearance underwent review. My background was reinvestigated. My financial records were scrutinized. My contacts were verified. The process was exhaustive and continuous. In my file was documentation of every case I'd worked. 4 years of tracking terror financing networks. 2 years of analyzing cryptocurrency flows for threat organizations. 18 months of coordinating with international intelligence agencies. I'd helped disrupt funding for 3 planned attacks. I'd identified networks in 7 countries. My work had been briefed to the Secretary of Homeland Security. None of which I could tell my family. I drafted an email to my supervisor, Margaret Chin, Director of Financial Intelligence. Subject: Family member initiated unauthorized background investigation. Margaret, my brother hired a private investigator, James Mitchell, former FBI, to verify my employment and position. The investigation will likely trigger security protocols. I wanted to notify you before the flags hit your desk. I have not disclosed classified information to my family. They believe I work in administration. My brother believes I'm lying about my position and wants proof. The investigator will request employment verification, which will hit the classified firewall. I'm filing this notification per protocol. Lena. I sent it at 11:47 p.m. on Thanksgiving night. Margaret responded at 11:53 p.m. Elena. Received. I'll coordinate with Security Division. When the verification request comes through, we'll follow standard protocols for unauthorized investigation of cleared personnel. For your awareness, this will likely result in a security interview with your brother and the investigator. They'll be advised that further investigation constitutes a security violation. Keep me updated. Margaret. I closed my laptop. David wanted proof. He get it. Just not the kind he expected. The security flag. The flag hit the system on December 3rd. James Mitchell, licensed private investigator, submitted an employment verification request for Elena Vasquez, Department of Homeland Security. The request went through normal channels. It hit the HR verification system. And because my position was classified, the system automatically kicked it to the Security Division with a priority flag. Margaret called me at 2:15 p.m. The verification request just came through, she said. James Mitchell investigating on behalf of David Vasquez. It triggered an immediate security review. What happens now? Security Division is opening a case file. They'll interview Mitchell to determine the scope and purpose of his investigation. They'll interview your brother to assess whether there's a security risk. And they'll interview you to verify you haven't disclosed classified information. I haven't. I know. But protocol is protocol. She paused. Elena, I need to ask, do you want us to shut this down quietly? We can inform your brother that further investigation is prohibited without explaining why. I thought about it. 8 years of condescension. 8 years of being dismissed. 8 years of David building his superiority on assumptions about my mediocrity. No, I said. Let it proceed normally. Let the protocols play out. You understand what that means. Your brother will be interviewed by federal agents. He'll be informed his investigation triggered a security review. It won't be subtle. I understand. Hey. I'll let Security Division know you're cooperating fully. The call ended. I sat at my desk looking at the classified documents on my screen. Financial networks I was tracking, threat assessments I was building, intelligence I was analyzing. David wanted proof I wasn't lying. He was about to get more proof than he could handle. Christmas dinner. Christmas 2025. My parents' house in Phoenix. The entire extended family. David had insisted everyone be present for James Mitchell's presentation. I arrived at 5 p.m. wearing a simple blouse and slacks. David was already there wearing an expensive suit looking confident. James Mitchell stood beside him, late 50s professional demeanor, carrying a leather portfolio. David saw me and smiled. Elena. Perfect timing. James is ready to present his findings. I smiled. Hello, Mr. Mitchell. James nodded politely. His expression was carefully controlled, but I saw tension around his eyes. We sat for dinner first. Turkey. Tamales. My mother's pozole. Conversation flowed. Cousins discussing their jobs, aunts sharing gossip, uncles debating football. David kept glancing at me, anticipating my nervousness. I ate calmly. Asked my cousin about her new job. Complimented my mother's cooking. At 7:30 p.m. after dessert, David stood. Everyone, attention please. The room quieted. As most of you know, I hired an investigator to verify Elena's employment claims. James Mitchell is here to share what he found. James stood slowly. He didn't open his portfolio. Thank you, David, James said. His voice was measured. Before I begin, I need to clarify something important. David frowned. Just tell them what you found. I can't. The room went silent. David's expression hardened. What do you mean you can't? I paid you $8,000 to investigate. I attempted to investigate, James corrected. I submitted standard employment verification requests for Elena Vasquez, Department of Homeland Security. That request triggered a security review. A security review? Dad leaned forward. James looked uncomfortable now. When I attempted to verify Elena's position, the request was flagged by DHS Security Division. I was contacted by federal agents and informed that Elena Vasquez's position is classified. Further investigation would constitute a violation of federal security protocols. David stood. That's ridiculous. She's an administrative. I cannot and will not complete this investigation, James said firmly. I've been advised that Elena's actual position, duties and security clearance level are classified information. I cannot verify, deny, or discuss her employment beyond confirming she works for the Department of Homeland Security. My mother looked confused. But why would a secretary need? I didn't say she was a secretary, James interrupted. I said her position is classified. That's all I'm authorized to say. I reached into my bag and pulled out my phone. I pressed a button I'd prepared earlier that week. A call to Margaret Chin. She answered immediately. Elena. I'm at my family's Christmas dinner. My brother hired an investigator who's been contacted by Security Division. The situation may require clarification. Understood. I'm coordinating with the response team now. I hung up. David stared at me. What was that? By supervisor, I said calmly. She's coordinating with the security response team. Security response team? David's voice rose. Elena, what the hell is going on? James spoke quietly. David, I was very clear when I returned your money. I told you the investigation triggered federal security protocols. I advised you not to pursue this further. You returned his money? My aunt looked at James. I refunded David $8,000 3 days ago, James said, along with written advisement that further attempts to investigate Elena Vasquez could constitute a security violation. David's face went red. You're telling me I can't even verify my own sister's job? I'm telling you her job is classified, James said, and that I was interviewed by federal agents who made it very clear that unauthorized investigation of cleared personnel is taken seriously. I silently pressed another button on my phone. This one sent a pre-written text to the security coordination team. Family situation requiring presence. Christmas dinner. Parents' address on file. My phone buzzed immediately. Team dispatched. 12 minutes. David looked at me. What are you doing? Following protocols, I said quietly. Protocols for what? Elena, you're not a spy. You're an administrative assistant who's somehow convinced these people you're important. The doorbell rang. Everyone froze. My father stood. I'll get it. He walked to the front door and opened it. 3 men in dark suits stood on the porch. Behind them, visible in the driveway, were 3 black SUVs. Mr. Vasquez? The lead agent said. He showed credentials. Special Agent Morrison, Department of Homeland Security. We're here regarding an unauthorized investigation into one of our analysts. Dad's face went pale. What? May we come in? Dad stepped aside. The 3 agents entered the living room. Every family member stared. The room was absolutely silent. Agent Morrison looked around, then his eyes found me. Ms. Vasquez. I stood. Agent Morrison. He nodded respectfully. We apologize for the interruption. We're here to address a security matter. He turned to David. Are you David Vasquez? David stood slowly. Yes. You hired an investigator to conduct a background check on your sister, Elena Vasquez? Yes. But I just wanted to verify. Ms. Vasquez holds a level 4 security clearance, Agent Morrison said. Her position involves classified national security work. Unauthorized investigation of cleared personnel triggers mandatory security reviews. Mom put her hand over her mouth. Agent Morrison continued. Mr. Mitchell, he nodded at James, properly discontinued his investigation and notified our office. We appreciate his cooperation. James nodded stiffly. However, Agent Morrison said, looking back at David, we need to understand the scope and motivation of your investigation. This is standard protocol when someone attempts to investigate cleared personnel. David's hands were shaking. I didn't know. I thought she was lying about her job. She's always so vague. Because her work is classified, Agent Morrison said. She's legally prohibited from discussing her actual duties. Dad spoke up. Elena works on classified national security matters? Agent Morrison looked at me. Ms. Vasquez, how much would you like me to disclose? I considered. My title and clearance level. Nothing about specific duties. He nodded. Elena Vasquez is a senior intelligence analyst with the Department of Homeland Security. She holds level 4 security clearance, which is among the highest clearance levels in the federal government. Her work involves matters of national security that I cannot discuss. The room was absolutely silent. My mother was crying. My aunt stared. My cousins looked shocked. David stood frozen, his face white. Agent Morrison pulled out a tablet. "Mr. Vasquez, I need to conduct a brief interview. This is standard procedure. It will take approximately 30 minutes. We can do this here or at our Phoenix field office." "Here," David whispered. "The rest of the family can remain," Agent Morrison said. "But I need everyone to understand. What Ms. Vasquez does is classified. You will not ask her about her work. You will not discuss her position with people outside this family. Any breach could compromise national security operations." My father nodded mutely. Agent Morrison gestured to David. "Let's step into another room." David followed him out like a man in a dream. The other two agents remained in the living room, standing professionally near the door. I sat back down. Nobody spoke for several minutes. Finally, my mother said quietly, "Elena, you work on national security?" "Yes, Mama." "For how long?" "8 years." Tears ran down her face. "And you couldn't tell us?" "No. It's classified." My aunt spoke up. "When David said you were lying." "I wasn't lying. I just couldn't tell you the truth." My cousin asked, "What do you actually do?" One of the agents cleared his throat. "Ma'am, that's classified." My cousin went quiet. 20 minutes later, Agent Morrison and David returned. David looked like he'd aged 5 years. His confidence was completely gone. Agent Morrison addressed the room. "We've completed the preliminary interview. Mr. Vasquez has been advised of security protocols regarding his sister's position. He understands that further unauthorized investigation would constitute a federal violation." He looked at me. "Ms. Vasquez, do you have any security concerns regarding this situation?" "No, sir." "Do you feel your position or safety has been compromised?" "No, sir." He nodded. "Then we'll close this matter with a notation in your security file. Standard protocol." He handed me a card. "If anything changes, contact me directly." "Thank you, Agent Morrison." He nodded to the room. "Enjoy the rest of your holiday. And please remember, Ms. Vasquez's work is classified. Discretion is essential." The 3 agents left. We heard the SUVs start and drive away. The room stayed silent for a long moment. Then Dad said quietly, "Elena, I don't understand. How did you become this?" "I was recruited from Georgetown," I said. "They wanted analysts who could find patterns in financial data. I was good at it." "For 8 years you've been doing this?" "Yes." Mom wiped her eyes. "And we thought you were just a secretary." "I let you think that." I couldn't explain without violating my clearance. David finally spoke. His voice was barely audible. "Those agents, they interviewed me about why I hired an investigator. They asked if I had any foreign contacts, if I'd discussed you with anyone outside the family. They asked." He trailed off. "They followed protocol," I said quietly. "Elena, I thought you were lying. I thought you were embarrassed about being unsuccessful. I hired an investigator to prove you were a fraud." His voice cracked. "And instead I triggered a federal security investigation." "Yes." "Why didn't you tell me to stop? You wouldn't have believed me. You needed proof." I looked at him. "Now you have it." Dad leaned forward. "Elena, are you important? In your work?" I considered how to answer. "My work matters. That's all I can say." One of my uncles spoke up. "Level 4 clearance. That's high?" "Very high," I said. My cousin asked quietly, "Are you like CIA? Homeland Security? Different agency? Same classification level?" The room fell silent again. Finally, my mother stood. She walked over and hugged me tightly. "My daughter is protecting the country." I hugged her back. "I'm doing my job, Mama. For 8 years we didn't know. For 8 years I couldn't tell you." He pulled back, looking at me. "David said you were just a secretary. We believed him." "I know. You let us believe it." "I had to." David stood abruptly. "I need air." He walked out to the backyard. My father followed him. I found them 30 minutes later. David was sitting on the patio, head in his hands. Dad stood nearby. I sat down beside my brother. "I'm sorry," David said quietly. "Elena, I'm so sorry. For what specifically? For thinking you were a failure. For hiring someone to prove it. For 8 years of condescending comments. He looked at me. For being so arrogant I couldn't imagine you might be more successful than me. I was quiet for a moment. I make $165,000 a year, I said. You make more than twice that. Money isn't success. No. It's not. What you do, it actually matters. So does what you do. Just differently. David shook his head. I defend corporations in lawsuits. You defend the country. He laughed bitterly. And I spent 8 years treating you like you were beneath me. You didn't know. I should have trusted you. I should have believed you when you said your work was classified. Instead, I assumed you were lying. Dad spoke quietly. We all did. We all assumed. I looked at him. I couldn't correct you without violating my clearance. I know, Dad said. But we should have trusted you anyway. We sat in silence. Finally, David asked, Can you ever tell us what you actually do? No. Never. Probably not for decades. Maybe after I retire. But you do important work. Yes. Work that required federal agents to show up at Christmas dinner. Yes. David laughed, but it wasn't a happy sound. I hired an investigator to humiliate you. Instead, I got interviewed by Homeland Security agents about why I was investigating my own sister. Yes. And I deserve it. I didn't disagree. We went back inside. The family was still there, subdued, processing. I stayed for another hour, then made my excuses and left. Epilogue 6 months later. June 2026. I was still a senior intelligence analyst. Still level 4 clearance. Still working on classified national security matters I couldn't discuss. David stopped making comments about my career. When family asked about my work, he said, Elena does classified work for Homeland Security. That's all we can know. My parents framed my Georgetown diploma and hung it in their living room. Mom told her friends her daughter works for the government doing important things. We had dinner once a month. David never asked about my job. We talked about other things. At Dad's birthday in May, my aunt asked, Elena, how's work? Before I could answer, David said firmly, she can't discuss it. National security. My aunt nodded and changed the subject. After dinner, David pulled me aside. I want you to know something, he said. I'm proud of you. Thank you. And I'm sorry it took federal agents showing up at Christmas for me to see who you really are. I smiled. Sometimes people need dramatic evidence. I spent 8 years building my ego on the assumption that I was more successful than you. I was so wrong, it's embarrassing. We measure success differently. That's okay. No, it's not okay. I dismissed you. I condescended to you. I tried to publicly humiliate you. He paused. And you let me dig my own grave. You knew what would happen when I hired that investigator. I knew the protocols. Yes. You could have warned me. Would you have listened? He thought about it. No. Probably not. Then I let the system warn you for me. David laughed. 3 federal agents and 3 SUVs. Hell of a warning. It was effective. Yeah. It was. We stood quietly for a moment. Elena. Yes. Whatever you do, thank you for doing it. I looked at my brother. For the first time in 8 years, I saw genuine respect in his eyes. You're welcome. I still drive my Toyota. I still wear clothes from Nordstrom Rack. I still can't tell my family what I actually do. But they know I'm not a secretary. They know I work on matters of national security. They know that when my brother hired an investigator to prove I was lying, he triggered a federal security review that brought agents to Christmas dinner. And they know that for 8 years, while they assumed I was unsuccessful, I was protecting things they couldn't imagine. I didn't set out to teach David a lesson. I just followed protocols. But when he hired an investigator to expose my lies, he exposed his own assumptions instead. The investigator couldn't complete his report. The federal agents did it for him. And sometimes that's exactly what justice looks like. Level 4 clearance doesn't just protect classified information. Sometimes, it protects you from people who mistake quiet competence for mediocrity. My brother learned that the hard way. And I learned that the truth doesn't need defending. It just needs time to reveal itself. Preferably with 3 black SUVs for dramatic effect.